Hello and welcome to Psyched, the show where we explore psychedelics through social, economic, and political perspectives. Hello and welcome to Psyched, the show where we explore psychedelics through social, economic, and political perspectives. Today, we're joined by Lucia Huang and Qian. They're the co-founders of Osmind, a public benefit corporation that provides digital health solutions for mental health providers and their patients. They recently completed the Y Combinator 2020 summer batch and went on to raise $2 million, the next step in building out their technology. Lucia, Jimmy, thank you for joining us and welcome to Psyched.
Thank you so much. We're really psyched to be here. And excited to talk about psychedelics and treatment-resistant mental health and all of these amazing things that are going on in the field.
Yeah, I'd love for you to just start off telling us a little bit about what your technology does. What is it that you both are actually building?
Yeah, sure. I'll kick it off and Jimmy, please jump in. But yep, we are really here to help revolutionize mental health. And I think we're really excited about a lot of the innovation that's been happening in the space. But at the same time, I recognize that there are a lot of people that have been suffering immensely from a failure of our mental health system to help people who in particular have treatment-resistant mental health conditions. So actually in the US, over a third of people with mental health conditions are deemed treatment-resistant, which means that they've failed 2 or more conventional therapies, whether that's talk therapy or an SSRI or something like that. And I think it really just speaks to a lack of, we don't have good treatments for people and we don't actually know what works best for the individual. Oftentimes patients are trying multiple different types of therapies and suffering weeks or months or even years between switching between them. And it's just really unacceptable compared to other areas of healthcare where a lot of advancements have been made over the last few decades. So we're really here to solve that problem, and we're doing that in a couple different ways. So we've built an electronic health record that serves treatment-resistant mental health providers and their patients. Again, these are people who failed multiple therapies and are therefore trying more sort of intensive modalities, such as FDA-approved psychedelic medicine, ketamine, even neuromodulation. And the software helps the providers with their administrative workflow, but also uses data that's collected from the software to help them with things like clinical decision-making. So helping to strengthen that bond between a provider and a patient, to help monitor these patients when they're at home and oftentimes not feeling well or even highly suicidal, and overall augmenting that level of care. And at the same time, those insights are also really useful for drug discovery, because if we can understand what ultimately works best for the individual based on their medical history or their demographics or even biological backgrounds, we can then help to create better therapies that are more tailored to the individual.
Definitely. And correct me if I'm wrong, but your technology is also HIPAA compliant, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so would love for y'all to take me through a little bit of what it looks like to actually build a HIPAA compliant solution for this space specifically. What are some of the concerns, not only with maybe data, but also with video communication, just anything that you can tell us about that entire process?
Yeah, so building kind of anything in the healthcare space comes with a lot of very serious privacy concerns and security concerns. So from the very beginning, it's really making sure that the entire stack is compliant with HIPAA and privacy laws, and having third-party auditors that can help us assure that we're following all the rules and that we're end-to-end encrypted and things like that. After that, I think it's just being able to build tools that follow all of these regulations. So you brought up that example of video, right? We can't just hop on FaceTime and have providers talk to their patients. But luckily right now in, I think just tech in general, but especially in healthcare, there are lots of tools that allow companies to really just use and get things off the ground a little faster. And I think that has been a real good driving force in just innovation in general within healthcare.
Gotcha. So I think, like, for instance, Zoom is also HIPAA compliant, right? So like, is the chat that we're having right now, is that a HIPAA compliant chat? And like, at what point do we, I guess, break out of that?
It could be if we signed a BAA with Zoom, and I think they probably have some things to configure on their end. But yeah, Zoom definitely offers that. And I think that's been one of the, I guess, silver linings of COVID, which is really getting telemedicine as an industry more robust and allowing all of these companies such as Zoom, which probably didn't really think that much about healthcare beforehand, really interested in the space and being able to now provide HIPAA compliant video.
Mm-hmm. And I think that you both met through an IT healthcare class at Stanford. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. What was that, what was that process? Was it over a project? Was it just through conversations? I guess, how did the idea of Osmind come to be?
Yeah. So like you said, we met in a class over a year ago at Stanford, and yeah, it was a healthcare IT class, and Jimmy and I have both been interested in healthcare for, basically our whole lives. Jimmy's on the way becoming a doctor at Stanford until I made him stop in his path, but hopefully we'll be returning at some point. And then for myself, I just completed my MBA and had spent multiple years in the healthcare industry beforehand, more on the life sciences side, so helping to cure neurodegenerative diseases like ALS and Parkinson's. And yeah, we just really bonded over our passion for the healthcare industry and how many things are wrong with it and that we can fix. And we just stayed in touch after class. And I think coming together over some personal stories and personal journeys around our own mental health care struggles. I mean, Jimmy and I have both grown up in really similar households where mental health is very stigmatized and have had our own issues with it in college and thereafter. And I think we just realized that combined with our excitement for the scientific innovation that's happening in neuroscience and with innovative treatments like psychedelic medicine made us realize that, wow, like this could really transform neuroscience in the same way that oncology is transformed in the last decade. Like we are on the precipice of a revolution, and we need to help build the infrastructure that will get these therapies across the finish line. I think we're all so excited about the potential for them, but like it is the US healthcare system, and there are going to be barriers and obstacles, and we hope that we can help both providers and researchers and patients overcome that.
Definitely. So Osmind as a tool seems to really be able to help individuals who have already kind of experienced some major ailments or disorder. They're treatment resistant already. They're looking for alternative solutions. Osmind plugs in, really helps practitioners. Is there a vision for Osmind to be able to extend, pre the point of someone actually being diagnosed with something, maybe even preventative medicine? And what does that solution look like if that is part of the vision of Osmind?
Yeah, I definitely think so, especially as healthcare as a whole becomes more value-based and more focused on preventative healthcare. And I think like in primary care, we talk a lot about using primary care as a way to avoid problems that come down the road, but we don't think about that very much in behavioral health or mental health at all. I think like the concept of let me talk to a therapist or let me do psychedelics as a preventative measure to ensure wellness before issues pop up. Like no one thinks like that, or at least not in the broader US healthcare system. So I do think that needs to change a lot. For us, that's definitely something we're interested in. But right now, I think the biggest pain point is really for someone who already has experienced issues, like how can we really help them get better? And as we get better at solving that problem, then naturally we'll be able to institute more preventative measures for the broader population.
Mm-hmm, definitely. You both brought up kind of all of this in the context of COVID. I have some friends who are also in medical school right now where this entire period has really made them question which part of medicine they want to focus on, how they want to contribute to the medical field. For the both of you, do you feel like you've seen a shift in the medical community in regards to seeing things as being more effective when they are treated from a more holistic lens? Or do you feel like, after this is all over, we're going to go and continue kind of drilling into the same concrete that we have been?
Yeah, I'll kick it off, and Jimmy's definitely got more of a medical point of view, but I think if anything, like just the rapid destigmatization of mental health has been really astonishing to see. I mean, I think there's some stats that like the first few weeks of COVID, like the number of calls, the suicide hotline for the US jumped like 900%, like something crazy like that. And I think stats like that are terrifying, but at the same time are making people realize that like this is such a huge issue, and like it's not just mental health in a bubble. Like to your point, it is a very holistic way of looking at things where mental health is associated with so many other comorbidities. It can affect your physical health, right? And it could ultimately really affect and rack up costs for the healthcare system. So I think people are really starting to realize that like you can't just focus on things in isolation, and that mental health is really a driver for so many other parts of healthcare where there's traditionally been more focus. And we've had a lot of conversations with very large organizations in the healthcare space where they're appointing like a chief mental health officer, for example, or they're really putting focus on this. So I think at least from a layperson's point of view, I'm obviously not a medical student, but it does seem like there's going to be a lot more focus and a lot more interest in this going forward.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think COVID has had a lot of benefits for the mental health innovation community, because obviously there's a lot more funding and a lot more interest from the medical side, and then also for digital health as a whole. I think there have been some key victories that have been more elusive over the past 5 or 10 years, partially because of COVID. And so I think those are obviously good. But at the same time, I'm a little skeptical that some of these trends are here to stay. I think like even with the telemedicine route, a lot of people have predicted this is going to be some like true inflection point. And yeah, things are definitely going to trend that way, but healthcare has a ton of inertia. And it's not just inertia and friction, but it's actually resistance, because the US healthcare dollars, like every dollar we save is taking away from someone, right? And that's someone whose company earns a little less money, and they're going to actively oppose this. So I think that things are not going to move as quickly as some people think because of COVID.
I like that hot take. I'm going to just jump in there. Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how many organizations have like, not exactly counter to Jimmy's point, but like they have transitioned quickly to adapt to COVID. But I do also have hesitations about sort of the long-term nature of those changes. So one example is like with controlled substance prescriptions, which directly affects ketamine and psychedelic medicine, is now, previously you weren't able to do that over state lines. And now like there are other companies in the space that are just prescribing at-home ketamine for anyone across the country. And obviously there are safety concerns around that. And like, we're not, stating any support or like we're not against that per se, but I think it's interesting because who knows, like the US government could just take that away in an instant right after COVID. So I think companies really need to be careful about like the defensibility of their business models and not, and really providing true value to the patient, that's not just dependent on one regulation.
One way to provide that value for the long term is the structure of a public benefit corporation. Would love for the both of you to kind of highlight, what was your specific approach to the PBC model? What are the values that you've actually committed yourselves to, and even maybe a little bit of context about how PBCs work in a general sense.
Yeah, so PBC is a public benefit corporation, and it's basically a special type of for-profit corporation that must consider another type of benefit in their mandate. So rather than just shareholder maximization, we've chosen to also consider patient benefit to maximize access to these innovative treatments. And that was something that, we intentionally did from the start, just so that we have these guidelines and guardrails so that we could focus on not just, operating as a startup or a company, but making sure that every step of the way we have that North Star of how do we keep helping patients. So specifically, some of the things that we've done are to help like lower sort of like underserved or lower income communities by providing our software for free or very, very discounted. So we've worked with a number of providers already just to help them be able to offer this more premium service to their patients and help augment that level of care. And we help work with nonprofit researchers and academics free of charge. So I think our commitment to open science does tie into patient benefit, because ultimately, if we can advance therapeutic knowledge across the spectrum, that will help patients too.
Yeah, a lot of this work of building the infrastructure for more patient-minded technologies, more patient-minded businesses, I think is, coming to light right now. What are some of the obstacles that y'all have faced, especially as you've gone and actually raised funds in being able to talk about your company as a PBC and as something that is more socially minded? Have you encountered obstacles, and what have they been?
Yeah, I think surprisingly, not at all. I mean, I think people are really just realizing that, like, I guess from like a purely like profitability point of view, like mental health is such a big market that any help that we can give to more underserved communities or people with fewer resources is really just a drop in the bucket. and ultimately really just like furthers the entire mission. So I think people realize that it can be seen as a trade-off to be a public benefit corporation, but ultimately there are so many benefits that come from helping patients, from helping even like public perception and branding, that it's definitely worth it. So we haven't come across any issues with it. And I think for us, it's actually something we care a lot about. And we wrote an article about this, that we think everyone in more innovative mental health treatments like psychedelics should be a public benefit corporation, because there really is no downside. And it's good to be able to consider things besides just profit.
Yeah, and almost like a stronger statement that, Lucia, we've talked about is maybe all companies in healthcare should be a PBC. And I think like having a way to really hold companies accountable with like exactly what is the public benefit that is stated in your charter for every single healthcare company, and then allowing consumers and customers and every other stakeholder in the ecosystem to really hold them accountable. I think that would be really cool. But I think also another trend is a lot of investors from top funds have become much more interested in impact investing, or investing in specific spaces that actually help further humanity. And I think like, yeah, like there are lots of money to be made in like getting people to click on ads or like social media platforms that may or may not help society. But I think people are on the investing side are a little sick of that. And I think they're actually looking to help make the world a better place. So I think that's been helpful too.
Definitely. What are some of the areas outside of psychedelics or even mental health in general that you feel like reaffirm mental health? And does a startup that's focused on something very specific have room in its arsenal to be able to expand and bring in things like environmental protections or human rights as it continues to grow and develop and build?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we definitely see so much opportunity within healthcare and outside of mental health. We talked about comorbidities with mental health, but also just neuroscience as a whole and where that's going. And I think there's so many applications for what we're doing and the types of information we're gathering and the insights that we're extracting that could help even with things like, neurodegenerative diseases or more like psychiatric conditions like schizophrenia, for example. But outside of healthcare too, I mean, everything is just so intricately tied to healthcare at the end of the day. And I think one question we get a lot is around, for example, social determinants of health. And that's a term that means like, well, you can have someone who's like perfectly healthy or not healthy, and you think that there are just standard ways of measuring that, like their biology or whatever. But actually, a lot of it comes down to economics too. Of if you have someone who's residing in a low income community, they're not going to be able to access the right types of care. And even a lot of insurance companies, for example, have started building out like very specific care management programs of helping these people get access to care and like providing community services, which is, you think is not really related to healthcare, but does improve health outcomes. So that's something that we thought about a lot too, is how can we expand beyond the scope of just like, hard science and innovation there, and even help with things like, social determinants and like the community aspect of things too.
Yeah, and I think a big issue is access to healthcare, and obviously access to mental health services has been an issue. But I guess just broadly, I think like tech has had a lot of issues with having the savior complex, like, oh, we're just going to build some piece of software, it's going to save the world. But I think in healthcare, technology does have a place, because it's the only way we can actually scale resources to people who actually need it. But I think the key barrier to that is not the core tech or the delivery of the healthcare, but it's actually the payment incentives. Aligning incentives so that the government, so that payers actually want to help every single person feel better over their entire lifespan. And then once that is good, then healthcare makes it, or technology makes it very easy to then scale the care to everyone. So I think we're really interested in helping people access like mental health care services, as well as just healthcare in general. And that's always something that we would try to promote.
One of the questions that I think a lot of entrepreneurs are asking right now is, there's been this extremely fast-paced startup culture that it takes place mostly in SF in the ways that at least it's narrated to us, but oftentimes can lead to extremely toxic behaviors within the organization, can really lead to individuals neglecting their mental health. How do the both of you, in building this startup and this organization, especially an organization that's gone through Y Combinator, really prioritize mental health for yourselves, for your employees, and for your organization as a whole?
Yeah, I think that's definitely really top of mind for us. I think candidly we can do a better job of it, and the irony does not escape us for sure. It's been a really good summer. We've made a lot of progress, and I think that's definitely the next priority is to make sure that we are being like a good examples for the types of change that we want to see. But some of the things that we do think about a lot are just like how do we bake this into company culture, not just from policies like, we have unlimited vacation and flexible hours and stuff like that, but like how do we as leadership also set good examples? And that's everything from, like, being honest and like, oh, I'm feeling a bit burned out right now. Like I would like to take some time, or being respectful of other people's, their preferred working hours, or, even just bringing things up honestly. Like I think a lot of stress and mental health like troubles can come from not really trusting your team. And so we're just trying to make it as open of an environment as possible. But I think, yeah, really leading with example is something that like we can keep improving on for sure.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
We're running close to time, but I would love to give you both the floor of, is there anything that you want to share with our audience, with individuals out there? Any last thoughts, anything that you want to make people aware about?
Yeah. Jimmy, you want to take this one first, or I'll give you a chance?
Yeah, I guess one thing I want to just say is like, we're very thankful. I think that there's so many people right now who are doing such amazing work to help people in the psychedelic space, in the mental health care space, and all of healthcare, and like everything else, like in the world, like with environmental health, climate change, advocacy. The world in 2020 has just been a terrible place. There's so much that's gone wrong, but every time like we see people that are really just devoting their own time, their money, their efforts to help people, we just are very thankful to hopefully contribute a little bit along the way.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better. I think like I maybe selfishly have just been really thankful to have something that I've been working on with so much meaning. So I think for me, from a personal perspective, I've been having a lot of conversations with like fellow business school classmates, for example, or people thinking about sort of career trajectories of what they want to work on. And I think if anything, this has really made me realize just like, wow, something that like every day you get to see like a patient's message of how they've, ketamine has changed their life, for example, or seeing your technology being used by like doctors and making it their lives easier. I think that's just been incredibly meaningful from a personal perspective. And I really hope that like other people are getting to find that for themselves too.
That's awesome. Well, thank you both. You did remind me though of one more question that I tend to ask during these interviews. Are there any entrepreneurs that you feel like aren't getting the attention that they deserve? They're building really cool things, they're really contributing, and it's not necessarily high growth entrepreneurs, maybe even nonprofit leaders, but folks who are contributing particularly to the psychedelics and mental health space. Anyone that you want to bring up?
Ooh, good question. I would be a bad VC compared to you, Mark, because I'm trying to think of who comes to mind. There's definitely so many great people. Jimmy, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to do a plug, I guess, for a space that I think has been very underserved, which is mental health care for adolescents, for university students, and then also for kids. And I think we're starting to see more and more companies pop up in that space that I think is just like so important. And one of our batchmates from YC, Alex at Daybreak Health, and his whole team, like they're doing really cool work for adolescents specifically. And there are some other companies popping up as well for just students in general. So anyone in that space.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. And yeah, to our audience, we'll see you next time on Psyched.